Learn Japanese history.
We are your navigators, Taro and Hanako.
Today, we're diving into a really pivotal time in Japanese history, the Tenpō era. That's around the 1830s, 1840s.
Right. It's fascinating because you've got the central government, the shogunate, trying really hard to, well, tighten its grip with these big reforms.
But at the same time, some of the powerful regions, the domains, were kind of doing their own thing, weren't they? Getting stronger.
Exactly. It's this real contrast. You have these top-down efforts from the shogunate, and then this sort of bottom-up growth and change happening in the domains. It paints a really complex picture.
Okay, let's start with the shogunate side. These Tenpō reforms. What kicked them off? I heard the Shio Rebellion was a big deal.
Oh, absolutely. That rebellion sent, well, shockwaves through the leadership. It really highlighted some weaknesses.
So they felt they had to react strongly.
Precisely. And after the retired Shogun Ienari died in 1841, the timing felt right. Mizuno Tadakuni, a senior counselor, he really took the lead.
And these reforms sound intense, like really strict austerity for everyone.
Yeah, they really went for it. The idea was frugality, simplicity. For samurai, for commoners, no more lavish spending.
So what did that mean in practice? Like banning fancy clothes?
Fancy clothes, expensive foods, sweets, even things like selling, out-of-season fruit and veg at high prices. That was banned too.
Wow. They were really trying to control daily life.
Very much so. And it didn't stop there. Entertainment took a hit too.
Right. I read they moved theaters, like physically relocated them.
Yeah, pushed them out of central Edo to the outskirts, and the number of yus, the vaudeville theaters, drastically cut from around 500 down to just 15 in Edo.
15? Why clamp down on entertainment so hard?
Well, the thinking was it was frivolous, maybe even morally corrupting. They wanted people focused on more serious matters, and this extended to books and printing too.
Censorship.
Oh, yes, strict censorship. Authors like Ryūtai Tanihiko and Tamanaga Shinsui actually got punished for their popular works.
Punished for writing novels. That's quite something.
It shows how far they were willing to go, and the reach went beyond the cities. Rural areas felt it too.
How so? What restrictions did farmers face?
They tried to limit side businesses for farmers. The idea was, farmers should focus only on farming, keep the food supply stable.
And then there's the whole thing with the merchant guilds, the Kabunakama.
Yeah.
They dissolved them.
They did. The intention, or the stated intention anyway, was to break their hold on prices and encourage free competition. Lower prices for everyone.
But that didn't quite work out, did it?
No, it actually kind of backfired. Those guilds, while maybe they did manipulate prices sometimes, they were also crucial for distributing goods. Taking them away messed up the supply chain.
So it made distribution worse.
In many cases, yeah. Led to more instability, not less. Shows how disrupting existing systems can have unforeseen consequences.
Okay, and another big one, the return to farming law, the Kerishi no Hush, forcing people out of cities.
Yes, trying to get people who had migrated to Edo for work, especially the poor, to go back to their home villages.
That sounds incredibly harsh. What was the goal? Control urban populations. Revitalize the countryside.
A bit of both, probably, but you can imagine forcing people back who maybe had no land or resources waiting for them. It caused a lot of hardship.
Right, but the real flashpoint, the thing that really caused a backlash, was the Ajeti Rei, the Domain Land Transfer Ordinance.
Ah, yes, that was a big one. The shogunate tried to take direct control, make tenri out of lands held by daimyo and hatamoto around Edo and Osaka.
That sounds like a direct challenge to powerful lords. Why risk that?
It was a massive gamble to consolidate power, get more direct revenue and control near the centers of power, but it directly threatened the interests of some very powerful people.
And they pushed back.
Fiercely. The opposition was so strong that it basically finished Mizuno Tadakuni. He was out of power after only about 2 years of pushing these reforms.
Wow. So that reform really failed.
Utterly.
Yeah.
And it really highlights how, despite their efforts, the shogunate's actual power over the domains was, well, limited by this point.
Okay, so that's the shogunate's story. Trying hard, facing resistance, maybe overreaching. But you said things were different in some regions, especially the Southwest.
Completely different dynamic. While Edo was struggling with these top-down measures, domains like Satsuma and Chushu were quietly strengthening themselves. They were innovating.
And they had better access to outside information, right? Through Nagasaki.
That definitely helped. They got earlier exposure to what was happening overseas, new ideas, new technologies.
Let's take Satsuma. They were apparently in huge debt. How did they turn things around?
They had crippling debt, yes. But under a very capable official, Zusho Hirasato, They managed an incredible turnaround.
How?
A couple of key things. They leveraged their trade connections via the Ryukyu Kingdom, and crucially, they established a monopoly on sugar production in the Amami Islands.
Sugar. That was the key.
It was a huge profit generator. They'd apparently learned brown sugar techniques from China earlier on, and during the Tenpō reforms, they made it a strict monopoly. They bought all the sugar from Amami Oshima, Kikaijima, and Tokunoshima.
So they controlled the supply and reaped the rewards. Smart.
Very smart. You can almost picture the scene at the domain's office in Oshima Merchants Gathering. Rice being exchanged for sugar, it rebuilt their finances.
And with that money.
They could invest. They promoted talented lower-ranking samurai, started adopting Western artillery, even set up machine factories. They were modernizing.
Interesting. And Chushu. Similar story.
Similar in some ways. They also had a leader, Murata Seifu, who focused on fixing the domain's finances. They restructured debts, set up monopolies on things like paper and wax.
But also military upgrades.
Yes, like Satsuma, they saw the writing on the wall regarding military tech. They adopted Western arms and, importantly, started promoting samurai based on ability, not just birth rank.
So it wasn't just those two. Saga and Tosa were also doing similar things.
That's right. Talented officials were rising, new systems were being put in place. It really shows these regional power centers becoming much more dynamic and, frankly, capable than the central shogunate seemed to be at the time.
It's like two different Japans emerging almost.
Yeah. In a way, yes. While the center was trying to enforce uniformity and control, the periphery, or at least parts of it, was adapting and growing stronger independently.
And this period also sees the first real steps towards modern industry, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Not just in those southwestern domains.
Correct. We start seeing shifts away from the old ways of production. For centuries, it was mostly household industry tied to farming, very self-sufficient.
But that started changing.
Yeah, in the 18th century, you get the putting out system, spreading tonyase kanai kujugish. Wholesalers would provide tools and materials to farm households, pay them piece rates for finished goods.
Like textiles.
Often textiles, yes. It was a step towards more organized production. And then later, you see the next step, actual factories emerging.
Factories with wage laborers.
Wait.
Like manufacture.
Exactly, kojusei shukyush. You saw it early in things like brewing stock, soy sauce, and later in weaving and casting towards the end of the Edo period.
And the domains themselves got involved in bigger industrial projects.
They did.
Yeah.
Many domains protected local crafts and monopolized them, but then you see bigger initiatives. Saga, for instance, was the first domain to cast modern cannons.
And Satsuma, under Shimazu Norekura, was really pushing industrial tech.
Hugely. He set up a reverberatory furnace to make better iron, explored all sorts of Western industrial methods, and it wasn't just Satsuma. Mito domain, under Tokugawa Nariaki, built a shipyard in Edo. Even the shogunate built an ironworks in Yokosuka.
So early industrial seeds being planted by both the shogunate and these powerful domains.
Yes, often focused on military applications initially, like shipbuilding and armaments, but also spinning.
What about textiles generally? You mentioned weaving earlier.
Cotton textile production really spread rapidly in the late Edo period. While many farm households stuck with traditional floor looms, you started seeing specialized weaving areas emerge, like in Western Owari.
And they use better technology.
They started using more efficient looms, the takahata, and developed systems with division of labor, often employing many female workers in a more factory-like setting.
So you see the beginnings of industrial transformation across different sectors.
Definitely. These weren't full-scale industrial revolutions yet, but the shift from household production to putting out systems and then to early factories and domain-led industrial projects was crucial groundwork.
Okay, so wrapping this up, the Tenpō era is really marked by this contrast. The shogunate tries these sweeping, centralized reforms.
Which ultimately face too much resistance and kind of fizzle out, especially the more ambitious ones like the land transfers showed their limitations.
But at the same time, you have these powerful domains, especially in Southwest, finding their own solutions, strengthening their finances, militaries, and even starting industrial projects.
Exactly. Satsuma, Choshu, they were becoming these dynamic centers of power and innovation, almost in spite of what was happening in Edo.
So these developments, the failed central reforms, the regional successes, the early industrial steps, the changing production methods, they all set the stage for what came next, didn't they?
Absolutely. They laid down crucial markers for the huge transformations Japan was about to experience.
Which leads to a really interesting thought to leave you with. How do you think these internal dynamics, the struggling center, the rising regions, shaped Japan's ability to respond when increasing pressure started coming from the outside world a few years later?
Yeah. What seeds planted during this Tenpō era, both the successes and the failures, do you think had the biggest impact on Japan's future path? Something to definitely ponder.